Well, how is and welcome to what are we doing? What's this one?
um, Nick's a little tired, viewers.
Yes, just slightly. Yes, this is the one about books. I think this is
Right, yeah.
literary as Feck.
Fucking books or something it's called. That's not bad actually as a backup. Fecking books. What's your YouTube video about? Fecking books.
So yes, welcome to this episode.
The first episode
already gone off the rails.
Of Fecking books.
So yeah, today we're talking about a book called Perdita Durango. It has a longer title. It's like 59 Degrees and Raining or something like that.
Yeah, 59 Degrees and Raining, the story of Perdita Durango or something like that. I think.
Something like that. But I'm just going to refer to it as Perdita Durango because that's easier for me.
Okay.
It's written. Yeah, good.
I'm just gonna ask, what were you reading this? Because I have it as part of this.
Yes, me too.
Sailor and Lulu complete novels, which are like 7 of them. This is the same thing you were reading, right?
Yes, yeah. Although mine's a Kindle copy, but basically exactly the same. And which is funny that 7 books fit into there. You realize they're quite short books overall. Most of them clock in at about 130 pages or thereabouts, which is about right, probably.
Yeah, they're single sitting novellas, really, aren't they? They're like you can. I've only read Perdita Durango is the second of the 7. I haven't read any of the other. I've only made it, but we'll get.
So I read the first 2 myself. I did read Wild at Heart, and so they're written by Barry Gifford, and I suppose he's best known for having written Wild at Heart, the novel, which was then very quickly adapted to the screen, and I think he did the adaptation himself with David Lynch.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and then Perdita Durango is the second book. It doesn't come. It also gets adapted into a movie, which he's involved in writing.
Yes.
But not for some years later, more like the later 90s, right? 97.
Yeah. Did you? I assume you've seen that.
Yes. Yeah. And we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
But yeah. So I mean, I think the reason why I have a kind of a special relationship with both of these, like with Wild at Heart, the movie, and with Perdita Durango, the movie, which is partly what made me want to read the books to see how similar or how different they were. Wild at Heart is one of my wife's least favorite films.
Is that right?
We watched it together as teenagers, like almost within the first 5 or 6 dates.
Okay.
You know, so I'm like 16, she's 15 or thereabouts. There's a lot of violence and a lot of simulated sex in that movie for something to watch with somebody you're just beginning a relationship with. And Jen does not like Nicolas Cage. He gives off some. I mean, she appreciates him. We recently watched Pig, which she thoroughly enjoyed, and she also enjoyed Bad Lieutenant or Bad Lieutenant 2, Port of Call, New Orleans. So it's not like she, but generally speaking, particularly that era of Nick, like nervy, like giving off bad uncle vibes, Nick Cage. Jen's not really down with that, and that movie's prime. Wild at Heart's prime Nick Cage.
He's a little bit like the was that Rubber Bandits, your dad's best friend. That's that kind of.
Yeah. So I can remember really clearly watching the movie on the couch in my parents' living room with her, and just all the cigarettes, being lit in massive close up, and then that scene right near the beginning where he smashes that guy's head to pieces on the floor over and over again, and kind of looking over me like, I might have not chose the best movie for the 3rd date.
I rewatched Wild at Heart not that long ago, a couple of years back, and I have to admit it. What I noticed about it this time is it's a David Lynch film, so of course it's worth watching, and it has memorable, like Willem Dafoe's demise.
Willem Dafoe's great in it with his brown teeth.
Playing kind of John Waters, but a slightly creepier version of John Waters or something. And he has that, he gets his head is it him who gets his head blown off?
Yeah, he trips and falls on his own shotgun
Yes.
and then blows his
but
entire
it's
head off.
still in the stocking, right? The stocking
Yes.
over his head. And yes, so it's got great and Harry Dean Stanton's in it, and quotable as well. If someone gives me, you know, a good piece of news or something, to this day I will say rockin' good news.
Oh yeah. I mean, Nicolas Cage is just golden in that movie.
Yeah.
And you know, Laura Dern is good too.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, of course, that's where the character of Perdita Durango appears. She appears in the novel, and then she appears in that movie, but played by Isabella Rossellini.
Right. But what I was going to say about that film was, going back to it, it's David Lynch films, therefore it's essential. However, it is one of the less is towards that end of his canon, I think, because it is quite silly. Like, some parts of it are a lot sillier than it's Dune end of the spectrum rather than you know, Eraserhead and
Sure.
Blue Velvet kind of, you know, it's just a little bit a bit too silly to kind
goofy.
of.
But I think that's what I appreciate. What I appreciate about it, and that's what I think when I was a kid, like I was kind of shaken up by the violence and the rest of it. But then when I came back to it in my early 20s, living with my friend Paul, he had rented and was like, "Oh, we got to watch Wild at Heart again." And I laughed the whole way through, and I was like, I couldn't understand what it was just a few years before. I got the movie's way of life, and particularly Nicolas Cage's whole performance. So I read the book, obviously, and then I thought we would talk maybe more about Perdita Durango, more than than Wild at Heart.
What did you make of Wild at Heart? Because the same as you, I kind of was led to the books because I wanted to know what the films were going off of. And I've had this for years. I bought it a long time ago, and I thought, oh, I'll probably rip through this, and then read Wild at Heart and was quite disappointed by it, actually. And then it went back on the shelf. Yep. And it's been there for years until you mentioned doing Perdita Durango, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of over the disappointment of Wild at Heart now. And I have to admit, I got on a lot better with Perdita Durango than I did with Wild at Heart. But it's been so long since I read Wild at Heart, I can't remember what it was about it that disappointed me. But how you read it recently, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get on with it?
I would say that both books suffer from the same problem, in that I think that these are books written by somebody who's apparently primarily a poet, or a poet first and then a novelist second, right?
Gary Gifford was a poet, apparently, yes.
Yeah.
Like the 60s and the 70s, right?
And so in that way, it reminds me of another poet turned novelist, but that I like a lot, is, you know, Charles Bukowski. Bukowski has a very terse kind of like meat and potatoes, like bare bones way of telling a story. There's not a lot of flowery prose. There's not a lot of excess description of what people look like or what the scenery looks like. But I find Gifford stuff so stripped down that I, in both cases, like the movies better than the books. I like the movie Wild at Heart better than I like the book, and I also like the movie Perdita Durango, having just rewatched the first 3/4 of it over the last 2 days.
Right.
I realized I like it more than the book because they almost read like film scripts. There's so little in the way of excess description. They really are a series of conversations back and forth with kind of minimal description of the action or minimal description of the setting.
Yes, I mean, they're not entirely dialogue driven in the way like George V. Higgins's early novels are, things like Friends of Eddie Coyle and stuff like that. It's not just reams.
No, not just dialogue.
And those books I loved. But actually, we should probably do a Higgins on this show or someone.
Yep.
But was Perdita Durango, was the speaking of the novels, was Perdita Durango a step up from Wild at Heart, though?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. Although, as we get, I mean, maybe we'll talk very briefly about the story, and then we can kind of, for people who haven't read it or seen the movie, basically, it's about two kind of ne'er-do-well characters who meet up with each other. Perdita Durango, who in the previous story was involved with the Willem Dafoe character, has blown his head off and is now kind of a free agent. And she meets up with this guy called Ramon Dolorosa, who is a drug runner slash, like, well, they're involved. This story involves smuggling a bunch of like placentas, and then in the movie those become fetuses, like full fetuses, over the border to be used in the cosmetics industry. But he's also a kind of Santeria, like brujo or whatever. You know, he's like he's a sort of a witch doctor figure as well.
Yeah.
And so not a nice guy, basically, and neither is she. It's kind of it has those elements of things like, which will come later, like Natural Born Killers, or what's that one with Brad Pitt, California, or then, you know, earlier, what's the Badlands? You know, it's like a youngish couple on the rampage, sort of a story. And so they end up
Bonnie and Clyde, even, you know.
Yeah, they end up kidnapping a couple of like gringo characters, Dwayne and I can't remember they call her Estrelita.
Yes.
But that's not actually her name. What her actual name is.
Oh, no.
And kind of assault them in various ways, and you know, the book and the movie don't shy away from the ugliness of these characters at all.
No, that's true.
Almost to an exhausting point, and that's where the book the movie almost gave me a little more time between scenes of like just relentless brutality and then glibness about that brutality.
Right.
You know, in that way, I was like, wow, this book is just like, it's a series of short, punchy little chapters, and every one of them is kind of like, ooh, that was another grim one, and another.
Yeah, they're like little rabbit punches to the ribs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the soul.
Some are particularly like you say, they tip over into, oh man, that's like when the, you know, spoilers by the way, in case you're gonna read, you know, there's like the very short chapter where the kidnapped girl's father, who's gone out, you know, to try and find her because the police aren't doing their job, basically. And
his name is Ernest Satisfy, or something Satisfy.
Ernest
Tubb, okay.
Like a country singer kind of name.
Right.
And just ends up just going down the wrong lane on the highway and gets destroyed by a truck, right? And it's just like, oh man, it's just like layering kind of tragedy on with a trowel, isn't it? Like, which is something I kind of so again, I can't speak to Wild at Heart because it was too long ago for me to remember. But in terms of Perdita Durango, it's a fast read, like you said, like, you know, 2 hours max and you're done. And like you, I am a fan of. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the book that reads itself phenomenon, right? And this is certainly that. And in a way, it's so easy to read. It's very easy to overlook that sometimes. And when someone makes it look easy, you kind of forget. Oh, hang on, this guy has just, you know. I mean, at no point in the book was I bored.
Yes,
this man has entertained me solidly for 2 hours, so it's worth mentioning that up front. But yes, it's a little bit like, I don't know, like a weird greatest hits of noir or something, isn't it? Like, but amped up kind of thing, and almost as if like I don't know. It's almost as if he's got some nice ideas and he's just written it down, but he hasn't woven it necessarily into a proper novel as you'd expect it. So it's just boom, 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 boom. And
the pieces are all, you know, satisfying in and of themselves, but it's almost like eating too much candy at a certain point. Like if you read too much of it in a row, there's an overload effect that happens where you start to get numb almost to the constant ugliness of
which may be the
character
point as
situation.
well. So I mean, it's that I'm not going to rush onto the next Sailor and Lulu story, but this isn't going back into the dark recesses of the back of my shelf. This has piqued my interest. Do you think you will be going on to the other? I'll certainly try the next one anyway.
I'm interested partly because I like the characters of Sailor and Lula a lot from the first book, and it was hard not to read it because, again, if you've seen the movie first, I read every line of his dialogue in Nicolas Cage's voice. I kind of like to continue with that and see what Nicolas Cage would have said if he had been in a sequel.
Yeah, well, that's what interests me about reading the other ones as well, is it'll be unknown territory. Because there's no film adaptations that I've seen before, so it'll be interesting to see, to judge it from scratch. Just okay, this is just the novel I'm going from now.
But I will say, so speaking to Perdita Durango came out when I was, you know, working night shift at the adult video shop. And
is the book or the film?
The movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was something that ended up in my hands, and I think I got like the full version of it like the first time. Like somehow I got it through somewhere. Yeah. So it was it's the over 2 hour long version, and it was one of those things I binge watched all kinds of stuff because it was a night shift. I was there from 11 till 6 in the morning or something, or 10 to 6 in the morning. So I remember watching it there on the TV and being fairly swept away by it at the time. And I remember recognizing sort of James Gandolfini, who plays the there's a character in, as the movie follows the book very closely.
Yes, there are some deviations though, right? Like Perdita Durango is somewhat more sympathetic a character towards the end of the film, which I don't know. In general, I think they toned down her nastiness a little bit. Which I didn't appreciate. I would have liked, as played by Rosie Perez, I would have quite liked to have seen the full version of Perdita Durango.
Although that is amazing to me, to consider the fact that like Rosie Perez, like I can see like Javier Bardem, that's quite early in his career, and it's really his first English language performance, right?
Hell of a haircut.
Yes. As you know, those of you at home who play bingo, I can't resist mentioning that it is almost the same Afghan hound's rear that Thomas Millian is wearing in in Face to Face, which is a spaghetti western. Anyway, it's a and you know what? Rewatching it this time, it made me realize how good he actually is. Like he is great. Like he's mesmerizing. And he's doing a little bit of Nicolas Cage, and I wondered if that was intentional or if that's just him anyway. But there's a tiny bit of like some of the tics and mannerisms of the sailor character.
What I liked about him is he's really good at embodying that. So there were certain scenes in the film that I could really relate to, like when he's in the middle of, when he's on like a high, when he's on, pulling some crime or something, and it's just like he's almost indestructible, and he's in his element. There's like in the middle of a bank robbery, he like enjoying it so much. He's when he's in the middle of the bank robbery, he like insists one of the tellers like get the kids for him and stuff, and the other guy's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then when he's walking down the street, and there's a beautiful woman coming towards him, and then he just kisses her, like. And they play it in the film as if, there's a police cruiser going past at the same time, so he but the thing is, as soon as I saw the woman entering frame, I was like, oh, he's going to grab her and kiss, because that's what I would do, like, because he's on that high, right? And I've had a few moments in my life, as you know, Nick, where I've been on a bit of a high. And you can just
there's been a swagger.
Yeah, you just, the world is for the taking, right? For those
Right.
5, 10 minutes. 30
Yes,
minutes.
yeah. Everyone
However
will
long it
admire us. You know, the whole world will admire us.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought he pulled that off quite well. And I appreciate those are the best bits. I'm with you. In some ways, I think the film is an improvement on the book. In some ways, in other ways,
just the scope because of the because of the like. I mean, I love all of the Mexico. I mean, I'm in love with cactus. I'm in love with deserts. I'm all of that stuff, and that's in a strange way what was missing from the book was that it was so thinly sketched that you had to just you had to kind of already have been to Mexico or have seen enough movies set there to kind of just fill in those details yourself. But the movie, and then the Vera Cruz. Another thing that I noticed from both rereading both books is a lot of people like to stop and tell stories, almost to the point where it starts to you're like, oh, it's another person who's stopping to tell a story to somebody else, to me, and that's okay to a degree, but eventually I kind of oh, okay, all right, come on.
Yes, it's like there's a scene in the Steven Spielberg film Lincoln, right, where Lincoln's about to tell us, and the character's like, oh no, he's gonna tell another fucking an anecdote or a slice of wisdom, enough already.
But I did, I mean the whole the Vera Cruz stuff is great, and to see it again, it's described in the book, but then to see them all sitting on this whatever this island is watching it on this screen, it's just I don't know, it's really a beautiful scene.
Fascinating cast as well.
Well, Alex Cox is in there for one thing.
Cox is in there. Screaming Jay Hawkins, I mean, anything with Screaming Jay Hawkins in
and he's not really in the book, which is he seems to have been a character added. But I'm always extremely excited.
It's a shame he's not in it more, really, because when he's on screen, he's great. He has this kind of weird, gormless look about him, and when they're doing the Santeria scenes as well,
those are quite
just hear it in the background, just
kind of doing Screaming Jay Hawkins.
And you're just oh, more of that.
More of that. Yeah, no, I agree. What was he's amazing in Mystery Train as well.
He's also in A Rage in Harlem. He's in as well.
Yes, he's he's great in whatever he's doing.
So I appreciated that, and I think what the film does, I mean, there's a lot of things to admire about the film, even though it's not. I don't think it falls short of being a great film. I think it's not a great film. What I appreciated about it is it's something I don't know if you get nowadays. It's a proper, reasonably high budget, good production values, Spanish, Mexican, US co-production that, kind of really goes for it in terms of, I mean, the AK, the kind of shitty AK for the cut version,
Dance with the Devil.
Dance with the Devil, which is so generic. But in a way, that's kind of what it is. It's a bit of a celebration of the dark side, and you got is that Urokudoji in it? It's some tentacle hentai anime.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, it is. So it's directed. We haven't mentioned, but it is directed by Alex. Right.
Who made Action Mutante and
who had done some pretty out there stuff. But what's amazing to me is that this movie stars Rosie Perez, that she read the script to this and was like, yep, I'm down for what is being described here. And those, so this is why, before we were talking, Swamp of the Ravens came to my mind. Swamp of the Ravens is one of those kind of 70s sketchy Spanish language horror films where at a certain point, somebody, you'll see somebody doing an autopsy and you're like, hang on.
Right.
That's not makeup. They just found a corpse somewhere that they had access to and filmed the actors. Yeah, and the stuff in I know it can't be because this movie has, Alex Cox and Rosie Perez, but it almost feels like it. Those scenes I can almost believe oh yeah, well they were shooting in Mexico. I'm sure they were able to just go out to the gully behind, you know, wherever they were filming and find a corpse. It's, yeah, those scenes are crazy. Those the Santeria scenes.
Yeah, the Santeria scenes are good. And also what I really liked about this, and again, this is something I'm not sure if you would be able to kind of get away with now as well, is a kind of really smart thing they did, I think, was the kind of anti-gringo scenes. I just like they cast like the two whitest people you could imagine.
Yeah.
But Harley Cross, who I guess is he was a little boy in The Believers, right? That Santeria with Martin Sheen, right? So
okay.
So I think that's why he's there. And then Amy Graham, who was like the younger sister of Heather Graham.
Right.
Right. And yeah, you couldn't get anyone looks more blanco than these two, right? Yes, and when they go around to the parents' house and, you know, Herb Albert, and then the scene where they're driving and listening to the Tuana Brass.
Yes.
And he smacks him in the face. And that's brilliant. That's gold, right? I really appreciate that they went for like, we're going to make, this film that's going to be released in theaters and it's going to be unapologetically just anti-gringo in this. We're just going to rip the piss.
Yes.
And yeah, him like, which isn't in the book, you know, he has that line about, look, I'm really sorry. I know we've been oppressing your people. And they just, just laugh in his face. That stuff's great. Yeah. I really appreciated that. Don Stroud is great as well. Does
he play the sheriff?
No, he's Santos, the crazy eyes guy.
Oh yes, right.
And did you notice? You said you only watched 3/4. So I don't know at what point, but there's a very sketchy scene where someone goes into Don Stroud's and he's sat there, and there's like a very little girl sat opposite him, like crying with blood on her face, and he just says something like, "Now that'll teach you not to bite," and that's it. And it's just, that's
good God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot in. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that they just went for it. Because I don't know if they would now.
I highly doubt it. And as I said, you've got a bunch of people who kind of won Oscars or were nominated for Oscars, you know, in this thing, right? Which is, again, like the caliber of people involved it's surprising for a movie that is as trashy as this movie is.
Right. Right.
But in that way, as I said, the movie to me is almost more satisfying than the book in terms of, although you're right, there are some changes made, particularly I think to Rosie Perez's character.
Yeah, that makes and there's a few small things, like in the book, it's they're taking the placenta to Los Angeles. It's Vegas in the film, isn't it?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And stuff like that, and yeah, the addition of the Screaming. But you know, any chance to put Screaming Jay Hawkins in the film is no bad thing, right? That's that's only a plus.
No, not at all.
Screaming Jay Hawkins, Schindler's List, bring it on. Anything.
Yeah.
In it.
He's going to elevate the proceedings for sure.
Yes. Just in the background going, boo, boo. Bad Nazis. Love Screaming Jay.
Yeah. So I mean, I think if people are interested in this kind of almost neo-noir, this kind of ultra boiled down kind of thing that Barry Gifford is doing, you know, it's not a bad place to start with the two that were made into movies. And then,
yes,
you know,
the other thing I just wanted to mention, and this is a new thing for me, so I haven't quite got my head around it yet, but it's something interesting to consider. So while reading this book, because like you said, there's that kind of boom, 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 and an overload of kind of elements and stuff. There was a part of me thinking, like, on the con, you know, because we've talked pros and cons, but on the con side, I was thinking, this reads very much like someone who's read a lot of other crime fiction or Elmo Leonard and stuff like that, and then and something slightly inauthentic about it. Right? But then I go on to Barry Gifford's Wikipedia page, which I'd never done before, and turns out his father was in organized crime, and there's a documentary that came out last year called Roy's World, which I think is Willem Dafoe is one of the narrators on it as well, which I think is basically about him growing up, you know, with a father in organized crime in Chicago when he was a child, and
right, having to live in hotels, right?
Yeah, I didn't have time to see it for this. I wish I had, but that was interesting because that slightly reframed because I was like, well, maybe he does know what he's talking about more than I thought.
Right.
So
it's not just a pastiche of Charles Willeford and
right.
You know,
there might be a ring of
Jim Thompson.
That maybe there is this kind of level of just crazy, right?
Right.
That you'd think is stranger than fiction. This can't be true, but then maybe I don't know, or maybe not.
It's funny though, especially because of the setting of this, and there's a Texan sheriff in it called like Rip Ford, and it did bring to mind, the Jim Thompson various sketchy sheriffs,
right.
In Population 1280 and The Killer Inside Me, and there is that kind of one of them, like Lou Ford, I think, is in
Ford, yeah.
two of the Thompson books. So yeah. But did you notice? I wondered if there was one last thing I wanted to say. Did you notice that quite near the end of the book, they suddenly made a direct reference to something that I only learned about very recently, thanks to you. Right near the end, it's I think it's Dolorosa speaking. He says, the government here had done that too, of course, back in the 60s, and the Mexicans murdered dozens in 68, right before the Olympics.
Ah, right, yeah.
And I was like, hang on. I mean, this is to see a reference to it within days of having watched the movie all about that was weird, because I never heard little
things like that actually seeded throughout, whether it's references to films or books or and yes, there were a few. There was something else in there as well. I was thinking, is that true? Like, is that something I should research, or or is this just like a myth kind of thing, or so yeah, no, yes, so it's a bit of a, I don't know. Now it's crunch time. I don't know. It's I suppose. I mean, I suppose I would recommend it in this format because it's a it's a bargain.
Yes,
novels, and it's quite cheap. Or at least when I bought it, you can get copies. I don't know if it's in print, but there's plenty of secondhand. What's the Kindle priced like? Is it?
It was very reasonable too. Yeah. So
right.
But I would say, like, for me, if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, I mean, I do think that Jim Thompson does it better. I think Charles Willeford does it better. I mean, there is a hipness to what's going on here, which is interesting and cool, and I think that comes through in the movies really well. But on the page, it almost seems almost arch, or almost, you know what I mean? Like that, like it always works better to me. It works better cinematically when interpreted by an actor.
Bit too flip and a bit too clever for its own good kind of thing.
Yes, yeah. Whereas somehow a great Jim Thompson book can have that glibness and that sense of humor, and the darkness, but still somehow weave them together into a less kind of, like, I don't know, you almost get whiplash from reading this, whereas you don't quite you don't from reading
somehow this doesn't have it doesn't feel marinated in its own juice. It's like someone just came along slumming it on vacation kind of thing, but turns out that we might be wrong. But still, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? It's still, that's how it reads, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Regardless of
Lost Highway as well, I think. Was he involved in Lost? I know he was involved in Twin Peaks.
Yes.
So if you're a David Lynch fan, I think there's no question that you should probably be checking out.
Another film credit he has, which I didn't know about, which is a curious one, was a 2011 Romanian film about someone going to Romania to look for their roots. Or, I can't remember what it's called now. And he's in it as well. Barry Gifford's in it.
Okay.
So a
Gifford doesn't sound like a very Romanian name to me, but
little curious to see it, just to see, yeah, if he has any screen presence or, you know. But I'll certainly
well,
be
if he's a
checking out
poet,
the-
you know, if he's a poet, he may have had to read his stuff on stage, so he may have some
and then
some skills.
you die.
Exactly.
But I'll be checking.
Is that a callback to a conversation we were having before we even started the show? I feel like it was.
I shall be checking out that doc though. I think the one about his dad. That sounds kind of
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I
sure.
guess we should probably wrap it up.
So, yep, call it. I will call it a day there.
Until next time on Feck and Books.
Yes, I'm Nicholas Feck and Sheacon.
And I'm Clive Feck and Davis.